Okay, Kimberly, hello.
Hi.
Welcome everybody to the BeeWyzer Masterclass interview series. Today we are grateful to have Kimberly Go with us. We are still here in Valencia for the STEP Global Conference, the Global Family Business Conference. And Kimberly and I and several others have been on a panel discussion together yesterday. So let me briefly introduce Kimberly. She's a nextgen, a third generation nextgen from the Philippines. Your family has a financial securities business, I understand, but Kimberly is not only dealing with the governance, the family governance of her own family, but you have also become a family governance advisor, but you are also working in the business of your family. So Kimberly, just tell us a little bit more about yourself and how did that all come about, your involvement in governance issues?
Yes, thank you for that introduction. Like Peter said, I am from the Philippines and I work for my family business. And besides the financial securities firm, we also have a retail unit, a community bank, as well as properties and holdings.
So it's like a wide array of businesses that your family has been in.
Exactly. We're very diversified and we like to be diversified. And besides working for the family business, I also do some family business advising, helping nextgens kind of in the transition process and helping their elder generation learn how to communicate with the next gen and vice versa. And how
the communication point was something that you mentioned. Huh? So how? Sorry, I interrupted.
No.
But how do you do that? How do you define that?
Yeah, communication is very important. Just because I think each generation has their own unique experiences and their own point of view, and oftentimes each person thinks that their view is correct and everyone else is maybe not as correct as they are. But I think it's important to realize that everyone's point of view is valid. Like, I work with my mom and I work with my grandfather, and they're part of very different generations. They grew up in very different times, and so did I. But just because, you know, their experience building the business and growing it is different from my experience, having been born already into a family business and with a considerable amount of wealth, doesn't mean necessarily that I know less than they do or that I know more than they do. We just know different things because the circumstances in which we grew up and the time and, you know, the cultural and socio-economic factors are different. So helping people realize that is very important, and oftentimes that starts with asking, oh, like, why do you believe this? What was your upbringing like, or what was it like for you when you started the business or when you entered into the family business? How was it like hiring employees? And I try to reconcile that with, I guess, my own experiences going to international schools in the Manila, as well as studying and working in the US.
Right, yes. Well, I mean, that's a very concise description of those communication issues that you have. I mean, did you find a trick, you know, to reconcile the views of the first generation and the third generation, and there's the second generation, obviously your parents are still in between that? I mean, any tricks that you kind of found? Or
yes, definitely. I think with the third generation, I found that oftentimes a lot of people who, you know, are entering the family business have a lot of new ideas, and they're very eager to change things up and do something that's a little bit different from tradition. And oftentimes the elder generation, who have been in the business for many years and they know how things work, they're a bit hesitant to take on new practices and take on new risks. So what I like to advise people my age, or, you know, part of the rising generation, is to just pitch an idea, but say, let's just try this. Just like a trial, maybe like 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, and then we can see if the results are good or if they're not good. And if they're good, we can continue. And if they're not good, then we'll stop.
It's a risk also, huh? I'm sure your grandfather is kind of hesitant, or your grandparents, and then, you know, if you do something new and you try it and it goes wrong, everybody says, I told you, you know, or not.
I think the thing also, no worries. I think the thing also is when I'm pitching an idea, or when I, you know, talk to my brothers or my peers, I tell them to make sure you incorporate your elders' thinking into the process. So you pitch an idea and you ask them, what do you think about this? To at least get some buy-in and to get their opinion. And they might say, oh, I think this is good or this is bad. And then you can ask them, oh, why do you think this way? And then they'll give you their reasoning. And so that way you engage in a dialogue with them and you also get them to think about your idea. And that's not to say that you should do entirely what they say or do something different, but just listen to what you think has value and take those things and incorporate it into your action plan. Because I found that if you ask them why they think an idea is good or bad, then they're, it's like they like to give advice.
They are reflecting themselves
exactly.
and want to give advice.
Exactly. And I found that the elder generation like to pass on their wisdom. So it's a very, you help also feed their ego and their legacy when you ask for their advice. And that starts to get their buy-in, especially if you think that they say something of value and you get them to help you, then suddenly it's not only you pursuing this idea, but you and the elder generation are engaging in this idea together. So it's more, trying to shift it to collaboration as opposed to just, everything, you do everything yourself, and then you disregard what other people say.
There's a few things you mentioned there which bring issues up. You said one thing is listening, and I remember you stressed that in the panel discussion yesterday. So it's an important tool which you are saying, to listen and then challenge the other person. I actually remember you said you in various times, I think, was it your father or grandfather?
My grandfather.
And you said, did you think it all through? And then have you said everything? And then you listened to him when he stopped, and then you would add stuff later on. But it's a big thing. So I'm grateful you realize that.
I think it requires a lot of patience.
Yes.
That's what I've learned, and a lot of humility as well. And to also realize that, everything that I was born into and everything that I have, it came from somewhere, and it came from my parents and my grandparents, and I wouldn't have had the education that I have, I wouldn't have the clothes, the experience that I've had if it wasn't for them. So realizing that, and realizing that they did something incredible to be able to give me the life that I have now, and to sort of respect that, I think is something that I had to learn to do.
Very good. And you mentioned legacy. So in BeeWyzer, in the masterclass, we say, you're passing over wealth to the next generation. You're passing over a family business, possibly the ownership or the management of the family business, or both. But you're also passing over the legacy. So do you cherish that? Do you see that? Or do you work with that in your own
absolutely. One of the things I love to do is asking my parents and their grandparents what it was like for them when they were growing up. And after I came back from college, I realized that, their experiences and my experiences were very different, and that came through because we would have a lot of arguments about what we think should be done in the business or how we should live our lives. And so I really wanted to know why do you believe this? And what was your experience like? And, I learned that in the past, my father and my grandparents, they had to share a house with my great-grandmother and with my grand-uncle, and they all shared a small room, and then their toilet was also in the room, and I was like, wow, I can't imagine living in those kinds of situations. And even with my grandmother, when I asked her what it was like when she married into my grandfather's family and she was helping my grandfather build the business, she was like, I had to go to the market very early in the morning, I had to buy some chickens, and then I would have to pluck the feathers, and then I would put them in a boiling pot. And I thought, wow, I can't imagine doing that. I just go to the grocery and buy chicken.
Absolutely, different times.
Exactly, so it's a different struggle, and I think that really humbled me.
Great, no, I'm very grateful that you kind of explain that so clearly. And I mean, you do it within your own family, but you do it also for others. But let me ask, financial literacy, financial education. So we touched on the soft skills a little bit.
Yes.
But what would you see a good way to educate the next gens? What did you? What was the positive points in your education, or the negatives? And on this panel discussion, we had discussed family governance, so putting up a structural, a systemic approach, both for the family issues but also for the wealth structuring. I mean, is that something that you relate to, or how would you define what would be a good education for the next gens in a generational takeover?
Sure. I think several points come to mind with that question. I think reflecting on my own experiences first, I think what my family did very well is that they did not shy from talking to us about finances. So they were very, instructive about telling us what stocks are, what bonds are, what kind of investments. So they did really do that?
Oh,
yes,
wow,
yeah.
That's amazing, yeah.
Yes,
great.
At a very early age. And when I went to college, my dad really insisted that I take classes in accounting and in corporate finance and in banking, so I would at least have that knowledge and understanding, which I think growing up in that environment, I was like, I'm not really interested in this. I don't really know why I need to know this. But now that I'm out of college and I see, what it's like to be an adult and how important it is to manage your finance and your wealth, I realized that really laid a great foundation for me to understand how you grow your wealth and how you manage your wealth and what the different vehicles are for you to, put your money and wealth in. I think with regards to teaching and educating the next generation, it is very important to educate them about financial literacy, and I would suggest that they do kind of what my parents did. I think the other aspect of it is kind of making your children or the next generation aware of what assets that the family has, because I think that I did not have as much.
On a holistic basis, as we say in BeeWyzer, but yes.
Exactly. Yeah. So growing up, I knew that we had properties, I knew that we had retail units, but I didn't really realize there's value in like a piece of land, or there's value in like a club membership, or there's value in holdings or shares that we have in another company. And all of those contribute to your wealth, and all of that has to be managed. And at the same time, I think it's important to make sure that they don't feel entitled, or that they don't feel like they can just sit and not work and that the wealth will be retained. I think it's very important to impart the idea that we are all kind of stewards of this wealth. We are here to maintain it, to grow it, and we can't just waste it, can't just spend it, but we can't also do nothing.
You are certainly well versed in all of these issues, so that's very clear. So
if you do nothing, then if you're not doing something to, I think, help grow the wealth, then it'll also be depleted and it'll die off, that source of funds.
That's what we are all trying to do, after all, on all of these conferences, to keep the wealth together. Maybe just as a final question, and thank you very much for your openness.
No worries.
Would you see yourself more on the entrepreneurial journey in the business, or would you see yourself more on the wealth structuring side of things? Obviously, you did not choose the independent journey to not get involved. So I don't know, any idea on that to conclude? Or?
Yeah, I think for me, I am, personally speaking, I like doing a lot of different things. So I think I would get a little bit bored if I did just wealth or did just like entrepreneurial. I don't see myself necessarily as a quote unquote leader in the family business in a traditional sense. Like, I'm not trying to become the CEO, but I know my eldest brother is very keen on taking that role, and he has the
fine if he does
skills.
That,
exactly. But I would like to support him. I think it's nice to have someone in the family that you can talk to honestly about these issues and who you can trust. So I would like to play that role, and at the same time, I would like to think about, the legacy and how do we sustain that in the long term, and also how do we build good practices in the family so that we know how to manage conflict when it arises. How do we know how to communicate? I think, family governance is very important, and as a family grows and continues on to the next generation, these issues will become increasingly more important. So maybe in that sense, I would like to lead and help my family through that process.
Perfect. So a bit like your grandparents and parents, you seem to be getting involved heavily on all fronts.
Yeah.
Kimberly, thank you very much for joining us here. Kimberly Go from the Philippines, the third generation next gen. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Really happy to contribute.
A pleasure, especially at the marina of Valencia.
Very beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.